Greetings. We forge on here. The train keeps rolling here with our course, World Religions, an invitation to that. Today we look at chapter 3. We're looking at indigenous religions of Africa. And this particular section explores the indigenous religions of Africa. We're going to not only do that, but we're going to explore these religions together in just a single discussion here, and along with the accompanying readings. And it's important to note, I should probably add this too, it's important to note that there's much diversity in these indigenous religions of Africa. Today, about 1 billion people live on the African continent. So there are thousands of different African cultural, ethnic, and linguistic groups. So the cultural diversity is reflected in the religious diversity on the continent. There's not one single African culture, put those in the air quotes, right? And more air quotes for African religion. So there's not really one single African culture or African religion. African religions are highly complex belief systems with systematic cosmologies and firm ethical principles. Furthermore, they have changed and they continue to change in response to interaction with other belief systems, other cultures, and technological advances as well. In the 19th and 20th centuries, African religions faced the reality of widespread European colonialism on the continent. In addition, the influence of African religions has spread far beyond their places of origin. This was primarily the result of the African slave trade, which lasted from the 1500s to the 1800s. So in this chapter here, we want to understand the diversity and similarities of African religious traditions. We want to understand the teachings of African religions, become familiar with different practices of African religions. We want to learn about the impact of European colonialism on African religions. And then lastly, understand the religious change in recent centuries. The teachings of African religions for followers of indigenous African religions, religion is not considered to be separate from everyday existence. The beliefs of African religions are found primarily in mythic narratives, which contain, the essential teachings. In most African religions, myths have been part of an oral traditions that have been passed down from one generation to the next through spoken word. Today, however, many myths also exist in written form. The myths of many African religions are most concerned with this world, right? The here and now, the world of humanity, rather than the greater universe. Many African religions teach that everyday human life is influenced or even controlled by gods or other supernatural beings. And in many African religions, a high god is considered to be transcendent and removed from the lives of humans. In addition to the belief of a high god, most African religions also recognize other supernatural beings as well that are probably lower in status than the high god, but still powerful. Some African religions have large and complex pantheons, right? Pantheons of groups or of deities. One example of a pantheon is in the religion of the Yoruba people, a large ethnic group in West Africa. Now, in African religions, spirits are often considered to be a part of God's creation, like humanity. Most often, spirits are thought to live alongside human beings in a shared world. And as a result, in many African cultures, spirits are part of a normal daily life. In many African religions, the spirits of the deceased are very important. They are sometimes known as ancestor spirits. The spirits of the dead are often active in the lives of their relatives and their descendants for several generations. Now, most African religions are anthropocentric. And what I mean by that is they recognize humanity as the center of the cosmos. And as a result, African religions understand the cosmos and the elements within it like supernatural human beings or supernatural beings, pardon me there, in terms of their relationship to humanity. And this is reflected in many African mythologies that begin with the creation of human beings instead of the creation of the world. As we discussed earlier, African religions often teach that the high God is removed from everyday human life. So in the myths, the separation from the high God often was the result of humans breaking one of the high God's rules. So many African religions also teach that the high God also created human social organization, customs, and rule of conduct as well. Now, the history of African religions. Human beings have had their origins in Africa, and our earliest record of religions comes from Africa as well. African belief systems and religious practices are highly complex, as well as being multifaceted. Rock art from Southern Africa dates back a long time ago, and it was likely produced by early hunter-gatherers. Scholars believe that the early hunter-gatherers recognized an active spirit world, and that individuals had the ability to interact with those spirits. Just like large-scale world religions, African religions have developed historically and accommodated cultural changes. African states and civilizations like Axum, the Great Zimbabwe, and the Ghana and the Mali empires, and they had their unique and complex religious systems too. African religions have faced some common challenges and concerns in early modern history. You have large-scale world religions, especially Christianity and Islam, that have been prevalent in Africa for centuries. And when people became Christians or Muslims, the influence of the indigenous religious traditions remains. And these traditions have shaped the form that these world religions take in Africa. The number of Muslims in sub-Saharan Africa increased as Islam spread throughout West Africa and along the East African coast from the 11th century to the present. Now, today, in addition to North Africa, the populations of much of West Africa, Northeast Africa, and East African coast are predominantly Muslim. The European colonial powers sent missionaries to convert Africans to Christianity, and the Christian Bible was translated into numerous African languages. And often the process of converting Africans included some cultural indoctrination. But today, as in the past, African, Muslim, and Christian communities have debated whether practices derived from indigenous religions are an appropriate part of Muslim or Christian religious practice. And in some cases, disapproval of indigenous practices and customs has led to major reform movements. In the first decades of the 20th century, African Christian leaders began to develop new Christian churches that spun off from long established missions churches like the Anglican Church out of England and Catholic churches. So the influence of African religion has spread far beyond the continent. In fact, many religious traditions of the Americas are derived from African religions. During the African slave trade, the religion of the Yoruba and other West African peoples like the Dahomey and the Fon spread far beyond the shores of their homelands. The religions of the Candomblé and Santeria and Voodoo all derive from African origins. Now, African religions as a way of life, the followers of African religions, for these followers, religion's something that infuses everyday life. And I probably touched on this a little earlier. It's not reserved for just one day of the week or for certain times of the year. African religious practice is a daily activity. So because spirits can interact and interfere with the lives of humans, religious rituals and ceremonies often focus on communicating with spirits or accessing their powers. So three practices are strongly associated with communicating with the spirit world. You have sacrifice, divination, and spirit possession. The primary way people communicate with the supernatural beings is through sacrifice, the dedication of something valuable to a spirit, which has power to influence the spirit. So in some African religions, a practice called divination is used to communicate with the spirits. So divination is the attempt to predict the future, right, through supernatural agents or powers. Another way people communicate with the spirit world is through spirit possession. A belief in spirit possession is prevalent through Africa. And in many places, this sort of interaction with spirits is a normal part of daily life. So in African religions, some people are believed to have the ability to manipulate the supernatural for their own ends. Western scholars have traditionally used the term, you may have heard of it before, witchcraft, right? To explain the use of supernatural powers to cause illness or other misfortune. One of the best known examples of witchcraft is from the Izande people who live in Sudan and the Central African Republic. The Izande believe that witchcraft is a physical substance that is present in some people's bodies. Sometimes people use supernatural powers or call on supernatural beings to maybe facilitate some healing. Now, most African religions emphasize the life cycle, celebrations and ceremonies that mark the transition from one phase of existence to another, and they're an important part of religious practice. So in many African religions, birth is the first important spiritual transition in a person's life, because it's, when a new individual is entering the living community of humans. Rites of passage making the transition from childhood to adulthood. These are extremely important as well in African religious traditions. So many African religions understand death not as an end to existence, but as the transition to the spirit world. Funerals and other rituals surrounding death are important because they have the ability to ease the transition of the deceased from one state of being to another. Women also play prominent roles in indigenous African religions. The teachings of many religions acknowledge important female deities or spirits, and women are actively involved in many aspects of religious practice. Women only play a prominent role in possession cults, or they often play a predominant role in possession cults, and are more likely to become possessed more than men. Some scholars agree that a woman's active role in the spirit possession has also led to their prominence in new religious movements. Because missions churches such as the Anglican and Catholic churches are most often prohibited women from holding leadership roles, women were highly influential in the development of the African independent churches, Christian churches. So women have also played active roles in African Islam as well. So in the early 19th century, West Africa, the teacher and scholar Nana Asma, a daughter of Dan Fodio, dedicated her career to encouraging the education of Muslim women. In recent years, there's been much controversy surrounding things like female circumcision. It's often described as having a religious basis, sometimes to maintain sexual purity of women. It's not practiced solely within one religious community, however, and there have been some attempts to modify the practice in recent years. So, as we been customarily doing after the lecture, I trust many of you are getting into the rhythm of this. Go through the assigned readings, right? I think I maybe have a video connected to this as well that will enhance. Yeah, I probably should add that now. The videos, look at the videos. Anytime there's a video, that will enhance the discussion questions and probably add to your quiz knowledge as well. The videos are generally, between 2 and 5 minutes. So, okay, that's a wrap on chapter 3, and catch up with you guys next time in chapter 4. So, see you then. Take care.